Whether you're joining one of our events for the first time or if you're a seasoned regular, welcome to the Developer Marketing Summit. We have an incredible selection of innovative content lined up for you today, but before we dive in, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our lovely audience, for joining us. From wherever in the world you are watching, we're sure you'll enjoy today's talks. To get the most out of these sessions, please make sure you're sharing your feedback and asking your questions in the comment section for our speakers to answer. Each of today's sessions recordings will be uploaded into our on-demand content library, which you can access with a PMA Pro membership or Access All Areas Pass. We are also really excited to announce the launch of the Developer Marketing Alliance becoming its very own community. You can now join our Slack channel to connect with peers, get access to fresh content, and discover new opportunities. So with all of this to look forward to, let's get started.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in for today's Fireside Chat. I hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit, and don't forget to ask us questions using the chat, or also feel free to connect after this session. My name is Ginevra, and I am a PMM working on developer engagement at Square, which you might also know as Block. And I am here today with Nishant and Jeremy to go through a few best practices in terms of messaging, working with developer influencers, and just anything that we feel we want to share with the audience about marketing to developers. So let's introduce our speakers for today. Nishant, do you want to say something about yourself?
Sure. Hey, thanks for the intro, Ginevra, and nice meeting you, Jeremy. Good to be here. For everyone else, I'm Nishant Karyala. I have been a developer, a product marketer, and a product manager in my lifetime so far. And to be honest, even though I'm in product management right now, product marketing continues to be my favorite one thus far. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys and chat with you a little bit about developer marketing and my philosophies around doing right by the developers.
Thank you. Now off to Jeremy, who's joining from Docker.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. So my name is Jeremy Castile. I am the Senior Director of Product and Alliances Marketing at Docker. Just a little bit about me. I actually started my career as an engineer. My undergraduate degree was electrical engineering. I started in the semiconductor industry, which is a great place to chop your teeth and get some skills. Learned a lot about building great products, interesting products, kind of the intersection of software, hardware, robotics, chemistry, physics. So definitely got interested in product marketing when I was there, working as an engineer, bringing products to market and working with sales and go-to-market teams. So from there, that was really my launch point. I spent about 7 or 8 years as an engineer, and then I jumped over into product marketing. I worked for a company called AppCon in the network visibility space, and that's where I really started diving into cloud and SaaS. Spent a lot of time getting AWS certified, which was really fun. And then I moved over to New Relic, which is fully application performance, all about observability, and was a PMM there, principal PMM, leading the PMM charge for application performance monitoring. And now I'm at Docker. Docker is the #1 most wanted and #2 most loved developer tool. It's an awesome privilege to get to lead the product marketing team at Docker. Our tools reduce complexity for developers so they can focus on building amazing applications. And so I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Nice. So we have some very meaty backgrounds here. So let's dive right into it, and let's kick this off with some canary testing. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, it's taken from software development. It basically has to do with just rolling out a new piece of software to a smaller subset of users to just manage risk and just measure impact. Now, this can also be applied to testing messaging. And I know Jeremy has probably encountered this practice sometime during his career. So do you want to share something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Canary testing is super interesting. I think for marketers, for PMMs that are, in the developer space, it's something that we can learn from, right? So canary testing is essentially a practice where software development teams will release a software update to a subset of their users. So in a way, it's kind of similar to A/B testing, but for software developers, they're trying to test in production in a real world scenario. So they want to find bugs or see if their code has weaknesses or will break in a production environment without impacting all of their users. They're just impacting a subset of users. Then they can essentially fix those bugs before they continue to roll out the software release to the rest of production. So
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's an awesome best practice for DevOps. Now I think PMMs can learn from this technique, and we can leverage that to our advantage for message testing. So essentially, it's about building your messaging and going and testing it in real world scenarios. So like at Docker, we'll test that with a subset of customers. We'll test that with a community of folks, and then essentially what we're able to do is before we do a big release, we can actually test our messaging for a new product or a launch, get feedback from a subset of our users or customers, incorporate that into our messaging before we go to launch.
Interesting. So Nishant, have you ever used something like this, or maybe do you use other types of message testing?
Yeah, I actually love the idea of using the concept, something that is relevant to the dev world, to message to the developers, right? So, and this is something that I do as a product manager as well. Like before we take it to 100% in production, we release things gradually and make sure that nothing is breaking as we hit different data centers, right? So yeah, absolutely. And on similar lines, I want to introduce the idea of minimum viable marketing. So we have something called minimum viable product on the product side, but in both the cases, the core concept is that you want to test things out with the least amount of risk and investment. So for example, when I start a new idea, be it a messaging idea or a go-to-market strategy, my philosophy is that, okay, once we have identified, we need to verify before we start amplifying it. So in the verification phase, what I do is I go for quick and inexpensive mechanisms to test these ideas. It could be, to your point, Jeremy, like quick website A/B testing, or some email subject testing. In some cases, like talking to people, to your internal teams, or go to a meetup and chatting with a few folks from their space, right? And at some point, you feel like, okay, this is it. This is working. And then we start amplifying. So at this point, I generally think in terms of, okay, can I write a blog? Can I write a white paper? Can I talk to analysts and press and let them know about this new theme in the market and have them start talking about the product, right? So the goal is to minimize your risk along the way and test your ideas, be it a messaging testing for your primary persona or secondary persona, right? Or be it a GTM strategy. So I love that idea of being able to pick existing mechanisms and best practices in other worlds and bringing it to the product marketing world. So thanks for sharing that, Jeremy.
You bet.
So you just mentioned something very interesting that I think we should dive a bit deeper into, which is actually leveraging an audience or some part of the audience that can amplify our messaging. So let's talk a bit about developer influencers. Now, Jeremy, do you guys work with developer influencers at Docker? What's your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as a PMM, marketing to developers and marketing products for developers, I think it's super important to have a network of trusted developer influencers. It's important for a number of reasons, but one of the most important reasons is you want to have that authentic developer voice. Leveraging developer influencers with things like message testing or content creation, thought leadership, just general feedback on go-to-market is basically going to help you, make your go-to-market that much more potent, that much more effective, and resonate that much better with developers. So at Docker, we actually have a number of folks, both internally and externally. So it's great because we have an opportunity to meet with a number of folks that are very knowledgeable about Docker. So we have a program called Docker Captains. So this is a group of folks that are, they don't work for Docker, but they're experts about Docker. Some of them have their own, large platforms, and they do trainings and things like that. So being able to, you think about kind of going off of the last topic that we were just on, but like even like things like early access programs and reading some of these developer influencers into like a launch ahead of the launch to get feedback and even participate. We recently did a launch at Docker back in August, and we did this with a number of folks, both Docker captains, internal engineering teams, and just influencers in the developer space outside of Docker. And what we saw was when we, by bringing them in, internal and briefing them ahead of the launch, when we did go to market with the launch, we saw folks come out that we had briefed, and like in the Twitter sphere and in other channels, really come out and champion our new products and our new pricing, and lend that that voice that gives validation and kind of proof point. Beyond just Docker talking about itself, you have kind of these third-party experts. So I think especially when we think about developer marketing for PMMs, like don't be afraid to go out there and make those connections with folks that are developers, that are knowledgeable, that do know the tools that you provide, and see if you can't pull them into your go-to-market.
Yeah, I think you just touched on a very relevant topic, because especially when talking to developers, paid marketing doesn't work very often. So it's very, very important to really have advocates who can really influence the others with some authentic experience. Let's say, I don't know, use cases or just partner case studies or anything like that. We really do that at Square as well, and it does really, really work. So tying back into the concept of a wider community, I guess, what has been your experience with this, Nishant?
I mean, first of all, let me be honest. I'm kind of jealous of Docker's community. You have such a huge community, and you have that luxury of like saying, okay, here is the champion that I'm interested in, and I want to focus more on. And there are all these other people that I can pick and choose from and prioritize, right? So that's a brilliant problem to have. I would like to talk to the rest of the audience. Like some of us may not have that luxury. We may have to create that community from the scratch. And when I say something from the scratch, it's not like there are no champions at all. It's more like, okay, you wouldn't have that breadth of people or breadth of knowledge that you can tap into, right? So that's where it becomes critical to be able to bring those SMEs into the pool and have them get excited about speaking about your product in various forums. And the way I went about it back when I was at Progress Data Direct was, let me make sure we're on the same page. So Progress Data Direct, we made ODBC, JDBC drivers for data engineers and data scientists. And it was very tricky to get them to talk about this product because it's like such a back-end product. Like things work, it's good. When they don't work, people want to talk about it. So that's how most developers, most consumers are, right? So from that perspective, the way I got them excited about it is like introducing new ideas into the market. Like I'll take an example. So there was this new standard called OData that not everyone was completely familiar with. So I would go to a meetup, chat with people about this idea. And this is another way of message testing. See how they're receiving this idea and take that feedback and write a blog about it. Like they have a ton of FAQs at that point. I wouldn't know all the answers. So I go back, write a blog about it, and then share it back to them. And then they start having conversation about it on Twitter, right? So now we have a few people who understand this concept, and I was able to tap into those contacts every time I needed some information on the product, or every time there was like a chat going on a Twitter channel, I would bring them in. And another interesting thing that happened along those lines was at some point I was in a Gartner conference, and I was using a partnership with Gartner to have an analyst review of our product roadmap. And surprisingly, we hit it off very well. So I think 6 months from there on, I was able to partner with him to actually speak about OData in a webinar. now there was like this free event that we were able to sponsor, because usually getting the speakers is super expensive, especially from gardeners and foresters, right? So this was one of those: be proactive, educate people, get them excited, and they want to be part of this initiative as well. So I also tap into my internal teams and the SEs and developers. And along those lines, whenever there's a webinar and there's like at the end of the topic, I let the people know that, okay, if you are interested in this topic, reach out to me so that we can work on something together. So it's always about, again, like marketing is also a little bit about playing to people's motivations. Some people are motivated by technology, some people are motivated by fame, some people are motivated by like a community, giving back to the community. So you have to understand what a particular person is interested in and position it accordingly and give them relevant opportunities. Does it make sense? Any questions on that?
No,
Yeah,
I think
it completely does. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's actually very aligned with my experience because, like, I feel like I can relate to both of your experiences because Square has a very big developer community in the US, but I look after Europe, and we just kind of recently entered the European market. And I feel like most of our influencers are from the US, and all the narrative has a tendency to be very US centric. So,
Right.
do you guys manage these programs on a global scale as well? Do you feel a similar problem that I am experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, developers are all over the globe. You know, certainly, as Nishant mentioned, we're super fortunate at Docker to have a massive, you know, community of awesome folks building really cool stuff. So yeah, we definitely engage with developers, you know, globally. I think meetups are an awesome way to really go and talk, you know, directly to users and kind of get their feedback. So I think that's a great call out, Nishant. And then also, yeah, like, you know, at Docker, our internal engineering team, you know, and I know we had mentioned this, but like is a great resource for, you know, developers and leveraging them. You know, at Docker, our entire company is distributed. So we have folks working really all over the globe. But we work with our internal developers to develop content for developers, right? So you have the people that are building the product, you know, writing blogs or, you know, short how-to guides or getting started. So yeah, definitely some value there in using folks internally if you don't have like a large community of users already.
Yeah, and Geneva, to your question, like from a global perspective, it was always a very interesting dynamic, at least from a progress data direct perspective. So this is one of those tools that you would use when you need very high performance. And there's a topic that we'll cover a little bit later as well. Like people from India or like some of those developing countries, they're less likely to buy products by themselves. So from that perspective, we tend to focus a little more on the US and European market or the Japanese market, which are like thinking in terms of, oh, let me build an application that is like robust and care for everyone, versus some of the smaller shops, they might be thinking, let me do with whatever I can. There's like a ton of open source content out there. I will use that before I cross a chasm and start dealing with some of those last mile challenges, and then I will shift to a more service oriented product maybe. So like from that perspective, while there are champions everywhere, sometimes it makes sense to prioritize and pick and choose from the community where they're able to most relate to. So in my case, I used to pick from US and Europe wherever possible.
That makes sense. So what would be your favorite form of content when working with influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's probably a number of different things, and it's a lot about what channel the content will go to as well. Like developers, you know, they're super unique in what channels they go to for content, and they really have a good nose for sniffing out content that's like marketing based, where you're trying to sell something, versus value or education. So, you know, I think my rule of thumb there for everyone, you know, creating content for developers is come at it from an educational, value-driven, you know, perspective, no nonsense. And so I would say blogs definitely help. And anything where you can provide things where developers can try it on their own. So like in our technical blogs at Docker, we try and always provide like code snippets or links to sample repos. So developers can download the code, play with it, try it on their own. We have a really cool feature called developer development environments where you can share it easily. You can bundle up all your dependencies and share with your team. So really creating content in a way that developers are used to consuming. Don't force them to go out of their way to have to consume content. If you can build it into their workflow, even better. In product messaging is super effective there as well. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I've seen in my experience at Square as well, we usually run a very big event on a yearly basis that's called Unboxed, where we also announce new releases for our APIs. And one of the big things are always workshops. Tying into what you said about sharing snippets, it really creates a lot of engagement because, it's not some kind of, let's say, passive content. Then you just absorb, you read or you watch, you can really play with it and use it. So yeah, completely agree. You also touched on a topic that I think might be dear to quite a few of us, which is how to actually market a paid product. So there is quite a transition between a free product and a paid one. So Nishant, have you ever found yourself in a situation like this one?
Yeah, I mean, like that's actually a good segue. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we were chatting earlier, as well as tied back to the DIY versus buying, right? So for me, personally, I've always felt that, okay, the core skill for a product manager or a product marketer or any business manager in general is like to be able to empathize with your end users. And from that perspective, it is extremely critical for someone to be able to understand, okay, what is a typical developer going through? And that's where we'll be able to map it back to, okay, what is their preferred content? What is their preferred channel? What is their preferred format, right? So everything will tie back to the persona. So some of the things that I wanted to highlight were like, number one, I've worked with agile teams in the recent past, and they are constantly running. Developers have like a very they have like time crunches, and they're always on fires, and that means they're looking for easier solutions that fit into their existing world. So from that perspective, like they would want an easy onboarding. They would want to try a product easily without having to get a bunch of approvals. So they want to try and see it for themselves. And to Jeremy's point, tutorials and video demos will be super critical, right? Because now they're able to quickly try the product without having to guesstimate, okay, how does this work? I think this API looks familiar with this, so let me try this. So there shouldn't be any guesswork involved. So as we make the onboarding easy, it becomes easier for them to like start liking the product, and eventually we get them to the stage of they have low or no budgets. So giving those free trials, right? So that becomes super critical in the sense that I have been a developer. I would think I'll try everything on the internet before I start buying something. I'll build myself, I'll give up that problem altogether. I'll talk to my peers, I'll do everything except buy the product. So giving them enough value with the free trial is super important so that they can actually experience the product as a whole and then gradually have this conversation in the context. So I always say like help people before you start selling them. So help them solve the problem. Appreciate the context they're living in. If there's an open source tool out there, help them understand how to make that work as well. And then tell them why will our product do better than the open source product. Just don't say that, okay, this is not good enough, because they wouldn't trust you. They, to your point, Jennifer, earlier, they do not like to be sold to. They do not want marketing stuff. They want like hardcore result. Like, okay, how do we quantify? If you say your product is better than your competitors, tell me how. Don't tell me this is the best product in the market, right? And finally, like the other important aspect is like the channels that they use. So people are either Googling, or they're going directly to Stack Overflow, or they're looking at Hacker News, right? So having your presence in all these forums is also critical. Like SEO is super critical for all these developers, and going into those channels and becoming the thought leaders in those spaces. Like people need to look up to us for any sort of problem that they're trying to solve in that space. So that's how I go about going after these developers. And again, like from free to fee, it's a conversation, gradual convincing. And if they don't buy and if they're happy with the free stuff, please do that. We will help you with that as well. That's always been my attitude so far. Jeremy, how did you do go about moving people from DIY to buying stuff?
Yeah. No, I enjoyed listening to your perspective. I think you had a lot of great, golden nuggets in there. So it's always fun to hear, especially, your lived experience as a developer and product manager, so it's fun to hear that perspective. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so much here to unpack. I think, my experience, I've experienced free to fee both when my time at New Relic, we had a big initiative, kind of sort of refactoring, like our pricing and packaging there. And then, even at Docker. So at Docker, I guess I'll start with this. Docker is developer obsessed. That's one of our values, one of our core, sort of corporate virtues, right, is developer obsession. So we wanna be the tool of choice for developers for building cloud native applications. So a lot of the free to fee, I don't want to sound too much like Captain Obvious, but a lot of it starts with the product strategy. And a lot of if you're even having conversations around free to fee, chances are the product strategy is already looking in that direction. But a lot of it has to do with friction-free, zero friction for onboarding for new developers. That's so much of kind of like getting to the free to free. First, you have to start with the free part. So that's creating like an experience that's easy to onboard. Developers can quickly get up and running with your product, and they don't have to get out the credit card. So creating and they can get value from it. So, at New Relic and Docker both, like I've seen how, the product teams have really focused on delivering a very generous free tier, so developers can get started quickly and get value out of the product at that level. So now at Docker, what we see with just tremendous adoption, tremendous growth, it's like a de facto tool for developers building cloud native applications, is it really becomes a question, not even at the developer level, but at their managers level or even higher, where you start to go, okay, well, we have hundreds or even thousands of developers using this tool. It's part of our pipeline, for building and deploying applications. We want to invest as a team that's using this tool. We want to invest in this product. So then it's creating, features at that layer for like administrators, for managers, that makes it easier to scale the adoption of the tool. Then all of a sudden it becomes so much easier to pay, in our case, for like a subscription. And then developers, the strategy we've taken is just make it easy for developers, so they don't have to convince their boss to go and pay for this tool. It's just almost like obvious, like, yeah, hey, this makes us all more productive, or makes our code, whatever it is, more reliable, reduces complexity, whatever it may be. And it's just obvious for, developer managers and folks above that it's like, yeah, this is an investment. We want to make an investment in this tool. And so don't put that heavy burden on the developers to have to go and convince their boss to, the value proposition for the product.
Sure.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I actually want to call out something. Sorry, Geneva. I just wanted to call out something that was really interesting. Like, it might be overlooked by most people, but that is what I feel like separate like really good marketing managers from others, in the sense that you called out the fact that you do not want to ask people for their credit card. So that's like a very obvious thing for many people, but if you think about it, it gets overlooked. So the strategy team or the product team or the leadership at some level is making the choice of, do I take the credit card information or not? And that's going to be like a big shift in terms of how many MALs or MQLs you're getting every month, right? So even though developers are unique, they're also still consumers. They still have the same problem that usual consumers have. And it is important to be able to, again, go back to that initial call out, that be empathizing with them all through the journey. And as long as you're paying attention to every step, you're able to make the right choices everywhere. Like the larger strategy, I think like people like Jeremy nailed it. They are able to tell people, okay, how to go about a certain stream. But if you're implementing it tactically, pursuing some excellence in a particular pillar, that's where it becomes important to be able to understand your end users accurately.
Yeah, well, absolutely. A frictionless free trial is going to make all the difference every time. Like even just what Jeremy was mentioning about offering a generous tier for like the free plan, it just really adds up so much in terms of loyalty, because basically you're offering so much, and at the end of the day, the switching cost is just so high, and the user has really had the time to learn how to use a product and how to really appreciate it. So it just doesn't really make any sense to switch, right?
For sure.
Okay, so well, I think we're at time, which is a shame because I feel like we could just keep chatting all day, but we have to go. So, well, this was amazing, and I hope you guys from the audience enjoyed it as much as we did. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Nishant, and thank you very much for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Yeah, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Happy to chat more.